The morning sunlight streamed gently through the curtains, casting a warm, golden glow across the room. She rubbed her round belly lightly, feeling the tiny flutter of life inside her, and smiled, a quiet, contented smile that spoke of love, hope, and anticipation. Today felt special, though there was no grand occasion marked on the calendar, just the ordinary moments that she had come to cherish, the soft cooing of her baby, the comforting presence of her husband, and the sense of safety and belonging that wrapped around her like a soft blanket. She hummed softly as she prepared a light breakfast, arranging fruit, warm milk, and small treats on the tray. Each movement was filled with care and joy, a small ritual of love for the family she held dear. Her thoughts drifted to her husband as she worked, remembering how he had made her laugh the night before, the way he had kissed her forehead gently, promising to make her feel cherished every day. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the little family they were building, the life she imagined for her child, and the bond that had always held them together. There was a rhythm to their mornings, a sense of harmony that made even the simplest things feel extraordinary. As she carried the tray to the living room, her baby nestled safely in her arms, she felt a surge of warmth and trust, convinced that nothing could disrupt the peace and happiness they shared. Little did she know that this seemingly perfect morning was the calm before a storm that would test her courage, love, and resilience in ways she had never imagined. From the shadows of the city's glittering skyline, she watched with calculating eyes, a tight smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Every post, every story, every photograph of the pregnant wife and baby seemed to ignite a quiet fury inside her. She told herself it was just jealousy, a fleeting irritation, but the obsession ran deeper than she would admit even to herself. She scrutinized every detail, the way the husband laughed at his wife's jokes, the tenderness in the way he held the baby, the small gestures of love that seemed to mock her own loneliness. Her manipulations were subtle at first. A missed call here, a whispered lie there, small provocations designed to unsettle the household without drawing attention. She would send messages to him that hinted at danger, teasing his attention away from his family, testing boundaries, and enjoying the control it gave her. Even in social settings, she leaned in close, whispered compliments that carried hidden jabs, always reminding him, subtly, that she existed and demanded notice. Neighbors and friends noticed small frictions, fleeting tensions, and side glances, though none understood the depth of what was brewing. The wife, trusting and unaware, dismissed early signs as trivial irritations, never imagining that a calculated storm was forming right under their roof. The mistress' quiet cruelty and unrelenting obsession foreshadowed a danger that was slowly closing in, ready to erupt in a way that would shatter the fragile peace of their family life. He lounged in his office, scrolling through messages from the mistress with a mixture of guilt and indulgence, choosing avoidance over confrontation. Every time the idea of setting boundaries crossed his mind, he dismissed it, telling himself it would pass, that nothing serious had happened yet, that she would eventually leave him alone. His wealth and influence had always given him a sense of untouchable control, but in this private struggle, he felt powerless. Instead of addressing the problem directly, he made excuses, postponed difficult conversations, and allowed the mistress' subtle manipulations to infiltrate the household. Meanwhile, small signs of tension began creeping into the home. The wife noticed fleeting looks on his face, moments when he became distant, his attention diverted for reasons he claimed were work-related. She caught half-smiles over text messages, unexplained phone calls, and sudden secrecy about minor matters. Still, her heart trusted him, her love blinding her to the gravity of what was unfolding. She told herself that perhaps she was overreacting, that he would never allow harm to reach her or the baby. Yet, with every ignored boundary and dismissed warning, the mistress' power grew. The husband's cowardice became a breeding ground for betrayal, and the danger that once seemed distant started taking shape inside the home. His inability to act decisively and his failure to protect his family set the stage for the looming catastrophe that would soon shatter their lives. The morning had seemed ordinary at first, a quiet hum of domestic life, until the mistress appeared in the doorway, her eyes flashing with a dangerous mix of jealousy and malice. The pregnant wife, cradling the baby in her arms, froze for a moment, confusion and fear mingling in her chest. What are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice trembling. The mistress took a step closer, her presence commanding and aggressive, the air thick with tension. There was no warning, only the sudden, shocking realization that the woman who had haunted their home for months had crossed the final line. Without hesitation, the mistress lunged, hands striking at her. The wife twisted instinctively, shielding her belly and clutching the baby tighter, each movement a desperate attempt to protect both her unborn child and the infant she already held. The room erupted into chaos, furniture scraping, objects toppling, and the baby's cries piercing the air like alarms. Panic surged through her as adrenaline pumped, muscles straining against the forceful assault. She fought back with every ounce of strength, pushing, dodging, and shouting, her voice cracking but resolute. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, peered through windows, gasping at the scene unfolding before them. A housekeeper or security staff might have attempted to intervene, their shouts adding to the cacophony of fear. The mistress, relentless, pressed her advantage, her face twisted in cruel triumph. Each blow and shove seemed to stretch time, making the wife's terror nearly unbearable. The baby's cries became a rhythm that amplified the danger, each sound reminding her that their survival rested entirely on her ability to endure and protect. The intensity escalated with every second, a life-or-death struggle that would leave scars both visible and invisible, marking the turning point where safety and innocence collided with cruelty and betrayal. He finally arrived, the sound of the front door slamming behind him echoing through the house, but for a moment, he simply froze, eyes wide, panic etched across his face. He saw the mistress leaning aggressively toward his wife, hands raised, and the baby crying uncontrollably, but instead of stepping forward to stop her, he hesitated, paralyzed by fear, or perhaps by his own complicity. Every second of inaction felt like a lifetime to the wife, whose heart pounded with disbelief and terror. How could the man she had trusted, the one who had promised to protect her and their child, stand by while danger loomed so close? Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the betrayal unraveling before her eyes. Tears stung her eyes as she shielded her baby, trembling from a mixture of physical strain and emotional anguish. The warmth of safety she had once associated with her husband evaporated instantly, replaced by the bitter realization that he had failed her in the most critical moment. Disbelief warred with fear, terror pressed on her chest with every swing of the mistress' hand, while heartbreak tore at her from the inside. Each second that he remained motionless deepened the wound of trust, carving an invisible scar that would remain long after the assault ended. Finally, when he moved, it was too little, too late. The wife's understanding crystallized. He had allowed this to happen, whether from cowardice, selfishness, or deliberate neglect. In that instant, her perception of their marriage, their shared life, and the man she loved shifted irreversibly. The emotional intensity was unbearable, a storm of fear, sorrow, and betrayal that left her physically drained, mentally reeling, and profoundly aware that the life she had known had been shattered in an instant. The betrayal was complete, and the impact would echo far beyond the walls of that home. Her body ached, every muscle trembling with exhaustion and fear, yet she refused to let go of the baby cradled in her arms. Each strike and shove from the mistress felt heavier than the last, the force amplified by the knowledge that the man she loved, the one who should have been her shield, had allowed this horror to unfold. The betrayal burned hotter than the physical pain, a relentless, invisible weight pressing on her chest. Her mind screamed for him to act, to stop the madness, but his hesitation, or worse, his passivity, only intensified the agony that coursed through her entire being. The mistress' cruelty was on full display, a stark contrast to the helpless vulnerability of the wife. Her smirk, the calculated arrogance in her movements, and the cruel laughter that followed each failed strike made it clear she thrived on fear and dominance. She mocked every defensive movement, every desperate attempt to shield the child, as if the life she held were nothing more than a prop in a sick game. The imbalance of power was palpable, the wife small, pregnant, and defenseless, the mistress towering in her confidence, wielding force with reckless abandon. But even in the midst of terror, the wife's maternal instinct surged stronger than her pain. She twisted, ducked, and shoved with every ounce of strength, refusing to let the baby be harmed. Her cries echoed through the house, a mix of desperation and determination, alerting anyone nearby that something was terribly wrong. Each moment was a battle against both physical danger and emotional devastation, the latter made all the more excruciating by her husband's failure to protect her. In that moment, fear, rage, and heartbreak intertwined, creating a raw, intense atmosphere that showcased the full scope of her suffering and the mistress' unbridled malice. The breaking point was absolute. The wife was pushed to the edge of endurance, her courage tested in the most merciless way imaginable. Just as the chaos reached its peak, shouts erupted from outside the room. Neighbors, alerted by the baby's frantic cries and the wife's desperate screams, had called for help, and security staff or family members rushed in. The sudden intrusion startled the mistress, breaking her rhythm of cruelty, and for the first time, fear flashed across her face. Hands were pulled back, and she stumbled under the pressure of multiple witnesses confronting her. The wife, still clutching her baby tightly, felt the weight on her chest begin to ease slightly, though the adrenaline and terror left her trembling violently. The mistress was cornered, her arrogance fading as onlookers stared, shocked by her actions. Whispers of judgment filled the air, and her reputation began to crumble in real time, every sneer replaced by fear and humiliation. The wife's safety was restored, but the echo of the violence lingered in her mind, each memory a painful reminder of how close danger had come. Trauma clung to her like a shadow, and the knowledge that her husband had stood by helplessly gnawed at her. In this moment, the mistress' empire of control began to unravel, her power over the family exposed as fragile and fleeting, setting the stage for justice and the eventual restoration of the wife's peace. He sank into a chair, hands gripping his face as the magnitude of what had happened settled over him like a suffocating weight. For the first time, he truly saw the consequences of his inaction, the fear etched into his wife's features, the trembling of her body, and the way she had clutched their child as if the world depended on her strength alone. The realization hit him harder than any financial loss or public scandal ever could. His cowardice had endangered the people he claimed to love most. Panic coursed through him, a frantic, uncontrollable force that made his chest tighten and his thoughts scatter. Guilt gnawed at every fiber of his being, each second replaying the scene of violence in vivid detail. He had allowed a predator into their home, allowed his family to suffer, and now there was no easy way to undo the damage. Despair settled him like a heavy shroud, his wealth and status suddenly meaningless against the shame that threatened to swallow him whole. He had built an empire, controlled lives, and wielded power in countless arenas, yet here, in the face of his own failures, he was powerless. The truth was undeniable, no amount of money could protect him from the moral reckoning he faced. For the first time, he understood that betrayal of trust carried a weight far heavier than any material loss, and the depth of his failure left him broken, desperate, and acutely aware that some wounds could never be repaired simply with apologies or promises. The wife, though still shaken, refused to remain a victim. With a clarity born of pain and resolve, she began to take control of the situation. She documented the abuse, collected testimonies from witnesses, and ensured that the assault could not be dismissed or hidden. Legal avenues were pursued with precision, her determination unwavering, and the weight of the law became an ally she had once thought distant. Every step she took was calculated, each decision a reflection of her refusal to let fear or grief dictate the outcome. Beyond the legal sphere, she used social exposure subtly yet effectively. The mistress' reputation, carefully built on manipulation and secrecy, began to crumble as those who had once admired or feared her turned away in judgment. Whispers grew into conversations, and the truth of her cruelty became public knowledge. Her power over the household, her leverage over the husband, and her illusions of control evaporated under the scrutiny of moral consequence. The mistress, once confident and untouchable, faced the humiliation she had never anticipated, a stark reversal of fortune that left her vulnerable and exposed. Meanwhile, the husband's reputation, long bolstered by wealth and social standing, began to falter. Associates, friends, and colleagues learned of his failure to protect his family, his cowardice and poor judgment becoming the subject of public discussion. Doors that had once opened easily for him began to close, and he felt the sharp sting of social and moral accountability. The balance had shifted, justice, poetic and inevitable, had found its mark. The wife's courage and strategic action ensured that those who had inflicted pain would face consequences, reaffirming the moral order and demonstrating that strength and integrity could triumph over deceit and cruelty. In the days and weeks that followed, the wife began the slow, deliberate process of healing. Every morning, she woke with the weight of the past pressing lightly on her chest, but she refused to let it define her. She focused first on her child, ensuring that every meal, every moment of play, and every lullaby carried a sense of love, security, and normalcy. The baby's laughter, small hands reaching for hers, and the simple routines of daily life became anchors, grounding her in the present and reminding her of the life she was building away from fear and betrayal. Physical recovery was only one part of the journey. She sought therapy, confiding in professionals and trusted friends, untangling the complex web of trauma, grief, and anger that had accumulated. Each session, each conversation, was a step toward reclaiming her body, mind, and spirit. She began to recognize the immense reservoir of inner strength she had drawn upon during the attack, realizing that courage had always been part of her, waiting to be acknowledged and embraced fully. Independence became her mantra. She made decisions without hesitation, rebuilt her daily routines around her own priorities, and reclaimed spaces, both literal and emotional, that had been dominated by fear. The lessons of survival translated into empowerment, as she understood that self-reliance did not equate to isolation but rather to freedom and control over her own life. Gradually, she emerged stronger than she had ever been. Trauma remained a shadow, but it no longer dictated her path. Every step forward, every choice rooted in love for herself and her child, reinforced her courage. Her story became one of resilience and transformation, demonstrating that even in the aftermath of betrayal and violence, empowerment and hope could flourish, and a life rebuilt with intention could shine brighter than ever before. The husband sat alone in his study, the walls around him suddenly feeling smaller, suffocating, as the reality of his downfall settled like a weight he could not lift. News of his failure to protect his wife and child spread rapidly, whispers and pointed glances following him wherever he went. Friends and associates, once eager to flatter him, now questioned his judgment and integrity. Invitations to social events dwindled, business opportunities vanished, and the aura of untouchable power that had always surrounded him disintegrated with shocking speed. His wealth, once a shield, proved useless against the public humiliation that consumed him. Luxury cars, sprawling estates, and expensive suits could not erase the knowledge that he had allowed cruelty to infiltrate his home, that his cowardice had endangered the people he claimed to love. Every reflection in the mirror reminded him of his moral failure, the cracks in his character laid bare for all to see. Regret gnawed at him relentlessly, a sharp, unrelenting ache that no apology could mend. He had controlled empires, commanded respect, and wielded influence with ease, yet in the most important arena, his family, he was powerless and exposed. The collapse of his authority, the public shaming, and the weight of his own conscience combined to create a profound, inescapable sense of loss. For the first time, he understood that some failures carried consequences far beyond financial ruin, leaving scars that no wealth could ever repair. She stepped into her new life with a sense of purpose that had once seemed impossible. The past, with all its pain and betrayal, remained a shadow, but it no longer dictated her steps or her choices. Every morning, she woke to the soft coos of her child, feeling a profound sense of responsibility and love that anchored her in the present. Her home, once a place of fear, had become a sanctuary, a space she shaped with care, warmth, and intention. Independence became her mantra, each decision reflecting her regained self-worth and inner strength. She pursued her goals, nurtured her passions, and surrounded herself with people who uplifted and supported her. Courage, once tested to its limits, had transformed into resilience. She knew that no external force could diminish the value she placed on herself or her family. The memory of the mistress and her husband's failures remained, but now they served as reminders of her own power, not sources of fear. With each passing day, she embraced hope, healing, and the freedom that came from reclaiming her life. The chapter she began was one defined by moral triumph, emotional growth, and the unwavering protection of what mattered most, her child and her dignity. In choosing herself, she proved that strength, courage, and justice could prevail, creating a life brighter and more secure than any she had known before.